11:17 now on midday, and we're back with our weekly News to You segment, remembering a presidential visit to Buffalo when the Senecas tried to lay claim to Grand Island and when a trip down the 990 wouldn't get you very far. Dave McKinley has our weekly walk back through time when those stories and more were all news to you.
10 years ago this week.
It is good to be back in Buffalo. Good to be back in New York.
President Obama was a Western New York visitor. His remarks began in typical fashion with a shout out to local officials, sort of.
Your outstanding mayor, Brian Higgins, is here. Give him a big round of applause. What? Byron Brown. I'm sorry, Byron. This is what happens when you get to be 52 years old.
The topic of the president's speech at UB, the importance of being well educated this week in 2013. If you think elections are crazy these days, 20 years ago this week, Californians were in the midst of a gubernatorial recall election where no less than 247 candidates, some famous, some not so much, had thrown their hats in the ring. This week's News to You pop quiz, who among them do you think eventually emerged as the winner about 6 weeks later among the field that had been whittled down to a mere 135 candidates by this week in 2003. Remember, this was back when Niagara Falls, Ontario officials announced that the Falls View would be the name of the city's second casino, when you could still catch a concert at the Continental, and when then, just as now, folks were complaining about rising gas prices.
I just went here a couple of days ago and it was like $1.56. Now it's $1.70 something.
I wonder how she feels today, as opposed to the way she did this week in 2003. 30 years ago this week was when 6,000 residents of Grand Island woke up to some eye-popping news. The Seneca Nation of Indians filed a court claim seeking the return of its 18,000 acres to them. Some figured right away they were really seeking something other than the land.
To secure a monetary settlement.
Something confirmed right out of the box by a member of the tribal council.
The government never gives us land back. They make a monetary settlement, a negotiated settlement with us. And that is really what we expect here.
After all, that's the way this gambit had previously worked.
For almost 2 years, residents in Salamanca fought in court to rescind leases required for people there to keep the Indian land their homes sat on. In the end, the lease deal was upheld.
But after a much more protracted legal battle, a federal judge ruled the Seneca were entitled to neither Grand Island nor a dime in compensation for it, 9 years after initially filing their suit this week in 1993. 40 years ago this week, when unfortunately parading around in gym shorts and knee-length three-ring tube socks was seen as fashionable, pop cans were still made of steel. There were backyard carnivals for muscular dystrophy, and while you could jump on the 990 Lockport Expressway, you'd get no more than a mile or so to Sweet Home Road, because it had yet to be expanded any further from there this week in 1983, when it was all news to you.
Thank you, Dave. So here's the answer to this week's News to You pop quiz about that wild California gubernatorial recall election 20 years ago this week in 2003, which initially had more than 200 candidates. Voters had to make two choices. First, whether to remove Governor Gray Davis, which they did. The second was to pick his successor. And in the end, they chose bodybuilder and movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger, who would go on to serve 2 terms as governor.